Good afternoon, everyone. Before I introduce Ramon, a bit about myself. My name's Patrick Kinghorn. I come from a family in the gaming industry back when it was a completely different beast in the 60s and the 70s. And then I transitioned to work in the media, into radio and television in the UK. From there, I was offered to come to Singapore, which had been my first trip to Asia 15 years ago to work for ESPN. And I've never left Asia, so I very much consider Asia home. And with the hair going, as you can see, and my age is creeping up, obviously, I thought I need to transition away from being on screen on television. And with my gaming background and what I could see was a burgeoning industry, it was sort of a natural evolution back into the gaming sector. And I'm, as a consultant based in Manila now, I work with several top-line UK gaming entities who are looking to transition into Asia and specifically the Philippines, which makes this chat with, I think, Ramon even more appropriate. And I'm certainly interested to hear what Ramon's got to say. So I'll welcome Ramon Garcia officially, who's the Executive Chairman of DFNN. And I know it's all on the websites, but I always think, Ramon, it's a great start to tell us a bit about DFNN before we move on to your work with the government here in attracting investment into the Philippines.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, first and foremost, I think my topic is investing in the Philippines. The fact that you've moved here, I think, speaks volumes about it.
Your work's not done yet, though. There's plenty more work to be done.
So anyway, DFNN is really a garage company. So it was a true startup, started with 3 people. My wife did the business plan together with me. We had some people who believed in us, and we're happy to say we're definitely unseen, but we're around. So while we may be known within the gaming industry, we see this really as a derivative of our tech initiatives. So for example, for online trading in this country, by volume and by transaction, you will never hear our name, but that's actually us. During quarantine period of COVID, some of the provinces used our quarantine monitoring solution. Our firm has qualified for things such as the national ID in the Philippines. So we kind of do a lot of quiet things, but you never see us. It's always our customers out front. So the background really of DFNN is a tech company. Again, hence, if you look at, my name's been tied with bringing Elon Musk's Starlink into the Philippines. We believe that it's one of the ways that the Philippines can leapfrog and innovate ahead of our neighbors.
I was going to say healthcare and gaming. I think if there were 2 more lucrative industries to be involved in the last 10 years, I'm yet to see them. So obviously, as you say, that the topic of this chat we're having is about investing into the Philippines. Great to hear Chairman Tenko, explain early this morning in his keynote address at length his plans for PADCOR, which I think everyone is in agreement is certainly on the ascendancy after, like so many gaming jurisdictions, having a little bit of a wobble during COVID and then trying to establish themselves coming out of it. In your sort of remit, if you like, aside from your work with DFNN, I understand you travel globally with the government delegations on presidential trips. They're very well publicized to attract investment into the country. So I suppose we'll get into the specifics of gaming in a moment, because that's what the Philippines is most known for, I suppose, industrially in this region. But what kind of response are you seeing? Where have you traveled recently? And are you confident that under this new Marcos administration that there's going to be a boom when it comes to investment in the country?
Well, you'll have to give me some runway about this. I think part of the reason I was asked to speak here is my background in capital markets. So I sat as a governor of the stock exchange. I chaired the listing committee. I was part of the legislative committee and helping firm up the rules of the capital markets. So if I were to look at the Philippines as a company, and you look at its financial statements, assets, some of these are what you would easily find on the net. 100%, you'll see that last year our GDP growth was #1 in Asia, 7.6%, which came in above our expected 6.2%. We were resilient after COVID. You will see that we are the 2nd largest investor soon in airports throughout the region, after only South Korea. You will also find out that from a statistical basis, you will see that the largest IKEA in the world is here in the Philippines. We will also basically have an economy that is blessed by a demographic bounty. We are now about 120 million people. By 2040, we'll be 150 million people. So if you compare that, that's almost 3 Spains. In the same time, Japan will go to 97 million people. And our economy will be bigger than Poland's and approaching Italy's. So on mineral resources, between Indonesia and us, we control nickel, we have bauxite, we have gold, we have copper. So these are a lot of the assets that you have in a country where the average age is about 24 to 25 years old. So the Philippines is definitely an excellent investment destination, and you probably have other nuances that people will not read in the news, okay? I think there is no better reassurance on the growth of it when you have the likes of Filipino taipans such as Andrew Tan, the Aboitiz Group, Ricky Razon, all announcing huge capex investments in their operations. Then you have Mr. Han here, who I've known for quite some time. I've seen his growth from his small casino and his grand plans. So these are really all, I guess, reassurances about the Philippines, but there are nuances. If you're looking at those financial statements, if you were like Warren Buffett to look at other signs or indicators that will tell you about the Philippines, and if you look at the notes attendant to that financial statement, you'll see that a number of legislations have passed. One is the RCEP was just passed. That means that's a regional economic cooperation. We passed the CREATE law, where our corporate tax laws will be aligned with the region and will go down to 20%. We've got, when I went with the president's delegation, being the honorary consul of Portugal, I had a resounding interest from the EU that wants to do a direct free trade agreement with the Philippines. And this has been resounded almost at every state visit, including Japan. So I thought I'd never say this in my life, and I guess you will not read this in the papers, right? But the Philippines is now the second most politically stable country in Asia.
That's incredible.
I mean, I don't want to name the other countries, but it's, I never thought I would say it. But I mean, we've had a...
I'm assuming after Singapore.
Exactly, right? I'm sure some of you guys, this is ASEAN, you know the issues in the surrounding countries. So
I was in Myanmar last week, so you
right.
don't have to tell me about that.
Or let's say the others. But you know, there are neighbors, there are friends, there are trade partners. But that says a lot. So we've gone through a democratic process a number of times, successfully. And with this one, we have a supermajority not ever seen in a long time in the Philippines. So that gives you a strong mandate. These are things that I would look for. And with these new tax incentives, which include the gaming industry, as well as the IT industry, as well as the tourism industry, which are other components of the gaming industry, I think the Philippines is a bright spot.
You've painted a fantastic picture, and I think very salient you mentioned that overwhelming majority won by President Marcos. It's clearly been reflected in the confidence you're seeing when you travel the world in terms of investment in the Philippines. But obviously we're at the ASEAN Gaming Summit, so let's break it down in terms of investment in gaming, because I myself, as I mentioned when I introduced myself, are dealing with UK companies that are facing increasingly tight regulation, looking to expand and expand across borders. And let's face it, things could change, but they're not going to change certainly in the short term. There's talk of Malaysia, there's talk of even Myanmar where I was. We've heard earlier this morning about the potential for integrated resorts and casinos in Thailand. Whether that translates to online gaming would probably be a longer runway. So PADCOR, the Philippines, Manila, if you want to be regulated and conduct proper business, is the only show in town when it comes to the region. That said, there are still always going to be, and you've alleviated some of the fears, questions of confidence, because under the previous administration, I know Chairman Tenko has done a lot of good work. We'd be churlish to not address and maybe at least touch upon and acknowledge there have been concerns in the gaming industry specifically. But as someone that's obviously working in the industry, living here, are you confident that we're coming on an upward curve now in terms of people having confidence in investing and doing business in the gaming sector, be it online or on land in the Philippines?
I think there are really two types of gaming investors, right? There are those who are really superficial in their research, and there's a quiet insider revolution that's going on in the Philippines. The fact that the Philippines, in fact, during COVID, allowed already which is within our law, interactive gaming, should tell you the Philippines is probably one of the most innovative, responsive gaming environments. Let's not set aside our hurdle rates. And we should call it out because it's not all good, right? I think the illegal market is many times over the size of the legal gaming market, all right? That has to do with a lot of factors. One, PAGCOR doesn't have the ability to prosecute or chase, right? So they have to coordinate with other government units from the Philippine National Police, be happy that we have due process in the courts of law so that it's all followed.
That cooperation is increasing, though. I mean, we heard again the chairman's speech. I mean, so that's something that the chairman is aware of and something they want to get a handle on because, of course, the tighter they can clamp down on the grey market, the more the regulated market is going to flourish and the revenues,
as well as confidence, right?
Yes.
Which is good, right? Now, the rest of the world is really segregating themselves between gray and black and white, and the Philippines is really moving towards, especially you have to understand, this board of PAGCOR, I think, was well chosen. They have diverse backgrounds from media to Mr. Tenko, who's a very well-known and respected businessman prior. So there is a different approach, right? It's a partnership approach looking at the legal entities as actually business partners of PAGCOR. That's a nice, refreshing view. But let's get back to the hurdle rates. Some of those hurdle rates include taxation. And this is a big issue, and at least they are being responsive. I know there are discussions ongoing, but at the current tax rates for the domestic or even international, when you talk about POGOs, we really have to take a benchmark on what will help us compete with the illegals. The second one, which is also improving, and not necessarily a PAGCOR issue, because the country on a whole is improving its ability to allow foreigners to stay. And this is probably we're going to work in the favor of PAGCOR. Again, as I told you, I had just come back from Europe with Spain issuing its nomad visas, Portugal doing the same, almost all treasuries wiped out. PAGCOR as a revenue raising for the government is going to be quite important. And the welcoming of these, I guess, investors in. Now you've seen Thailand, Malaysia, even Bali announce up, but nothing as substantial as the Philippines. Our problem is we're not well known. So going back to gaming, that second layer are the quiet insiders. So very few people know that many have relocated their regional headquarters for gaming to Manila, from Singapore, from Macau.
You've seen that with slot machine providers.
Exactly. And, we already match, if not exceed, the number of slot machines there. Italy is a large gaming market by GGR. And yet, our population will be much more than Italy. And if you take, let's say, 5% ultra high net worth individuals, let's forget international, 5% ultra high net worth individuals of either Indonesia and the Philippines, that's actually many times more than Singapore and so forth. So you've got a good domestic market. We are a welcoming country. I think there's no cruise ship, there's no hotel in the world without Filipinos, right? So we've got that. And by culture, we have no negative word for a foreigner. That's unique in Asia. So the Philippines is actually having a quiet revolution. I know slot machine companies who are doing their programming here from the UK. Obviously, I can't mention their names. I know many who are doing back office operations. I know many who have grown their programmers from Sweden. So the problem is sometimes we have issues with the initial superficial look at the POGO industry as China-centric. Well, China has been cracking down. But remember, countries like the United States and across the world are going to continue legalizing. The same reason they came to the Philippines for BPO business will be the same reason that they will also look at this area as a hub.
Yeah, I want to ask you about POGOs because, again, that's one of the areas that's attracted negative headlines, so we should address it. Let's just go back a little bit there. You mentioned taxation. I'm sure this room is full of people, both land-based and online, that are liking what you're hearing, thinking of doing business here. I've spoken to those people over in the UK. The first question they ask me, and this is something you can help me on, is the 60% issue. So when I say to you the 60% issue, maybe you could elaborate to the audience exactly what that entails.
Sure, I'll be very clear. Gaming and defense are regulated industries. It's 60-40. So my only advice here, especially if you talk about investing in the Philippines, is realize that's the law. I mean, you can always structure ways around it, but wait for us because I think we're changing, or there are moves to change the Constitution. I just ask you, don't break the law. In the Philippines, play the long game. Don't play the short game.
And just to clarify, sorry, that's the 60% of the company of an entity must be Filipino owned.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Now, if we were able to change our law to allow Elon Musk Starlink to come in, guess what we've done? 7,764 islands now have internet. Please tell me any other, if you want to do back office, you can now set up your office almost anywhere. So play the long game in the Philippines. Anybody I've seen who's always said, oh, we have shortcuts, or we work with influencers, trust me, eventually there'll be a Senate investigation. You don't want to go there. Choose your partners well.
Okay, let's mention POGOs, because I think, again, listening to Chairman Tenko's address today, it's a problem. It's being dealt with. It's been unfortunate. It's clearly attracted some negative headlines. But there seems to be a clear move from PADCOR and the other governing bodies that you mentioned now to kind of isolate the issue. I heard Chairman Tenko mention that they're moving to, implement new license brackets, new measures to attract other areas of the gaming industry that, if you like, are separate from that. What's your view on the POGOs? Are we coming out of that dark period where we've seen some issues?
Like I said, again, it's two-tier, right? The dark issues were because of it being new, right? Just like when the BPO industry started here, the rules and regulations continue to develop. But again, there is that quiet revolution. Those who are following the law, those that are not looking at China, right? Those who are supporting their operations globally in Europe and so forth. And places like Curaçao are actually going to start losing, as we continue to improve, their customers probably to countries that have the scale that we are. Now, here's another nuance that you should look at, all right? And no one will write this in the papers, but I'm telling you it's true, okay? The Philippines is now at the sweet spot of geopolitical value, all right? China wants to be friends with us. Japan wants to be friends with us. The United States wants to be friends with us. Europe is now looking at the Philippines, especially the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, and Spain, which I've returned, to make this their beachhead throughout Asia. Spanish companies such as Acciona have won infrastructure contracts here. Thales just won a contract for our subway systems. So the Philippines is a unique situation. We're an enemy to none and a friend to all. So that's a unique situation. Take advantage of that.
I gotta say, and that's a very good point you make, when you said earlier on that it's the second most politically stable country after Singapore, it's no coincidence that Singapore has managed that balancing act of keeping America and China both on side simultaneously, which clearly is a huge advantage. So that's certainly going there. I must have a look at this wonderful app. Despite the fact I'm only 47, which is old enough, I'm not really technically minded, but I have been taken away by this Hoover App, and I noticed on the sessions there were a couple of questions. So bearing in mind people are taking the time to write the questions, I should ask them. I've got one here. What are the securities that a foreigner would have to invest in the Philippines? He does this question. I mentioned, again, we've already touched on it, some of the negative headlines. Again, what guarantees are there? What securities are there? I think you've elaborated on this. But again, I mean, you say it with conviction that the Philippines, Manila, is open for business and people can invest and feel safe, that anything that might have gone before under previous administrations is a thing of the past.
We're getting that way. Remember, a lot of our leaders are people who are now coming of age who have actually studied in Western countries, okay? Now, there's another thing that you should be aware of. Again, as you go deeper into the Philippines, our regional partners don't have dissimilar problems. In fact, they may have more. But there's a problem with the Philippines. The Philippines is the third largest speaking country in the world. So our newspapers are in English, our contracts are in English, so obviously any negative news immediately translates.
That's a very good point.
But it doesn't mean it's not happening in our regional neighbors. You just can't understand what's written in the newspapers, right?
And of course the English, we should have touched on that, is a huge advantage for potential workforce recruitment as well.
Right.
Okay, so we got that.
But I'd like to add one more part to that, Patrick. I will use an analogy, okay? And this should reassure you of the Philippine system. The Philippine system, and this had nothing to do with gaming, only as a corollary, is the only country in Southeast Asia where your airspace is civilian. That should already tell you something. Thailand is military airspace. Singapore is military airspace. Malaysia is military airspace. Indonesia is military airspace. So that means in the Philippines, you have a checks and balances. You have Office of the President, you have the legislative, and you have the judicial. Now, there's no perfect democratic system, but I guarantee you, at least the Philippines does have a democratic system.
Okay, another question here. What are the other innovative initiatives being undertaken now, if any, by the government and the private sector to improve the gaming conditions here in the Philippines? Well, obviously, this question came in yesterday. We heard Chairman Tenko waxing very lyrical about the plans he's got, the privatization of the PAGCOR casinos, new brackets and new strands of licensing coming in. You know, could you think of one? I mean, you've already spoken about quite a few, but what would be the most promising new development in terms of initiative that you've seen under President Marcos to attract investment, be it the gaming sector or any other?
You know, sometimes the simple answer is the best. The government is listening. It's listening and responding to our needs as businessmen. So that's a unique situation. Right now, you'll see that the president has put up clusters from agriculture to economics with some of the best corporate conglomerates in the country who are all crossing corporate lines of interest to help the Philippines. So that's unique. Number two, as far as tech goes, I've never seen a State of the Nation address by any president where 70% of the State of the Nation address was based on using technology to improve people's lives. So the Philippines actually, and I was speaking with Nomura, who's an ex-Macquarie guy, but he handles tech throughout the region. They're looking at the Philippines as a real tech center and hub for this. We still have work in progress. We're working on package 4, where hopefully we can change equity compensation, which is currently taxed at issue, to follow Israel, which is taxed at sale. And as you may or may not know, Israel controls 1/3 of NASDAQ companies. So this is what I mean by government is listening. We're coming up and actually changing our archaic laws to match today's reality. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it certainly does. And one last question that's been sent in on the app. Step by step, how can the medium and smaller size gaming companies invest in the Philippines legally in terms of documents, financial reports and guidelines? Well, and again, we could probably take us an hour to explain that one fully, but suffice to say, as far as I know, and I've studied this, all the information of what you need is available, readily available on the PAGCOR website. And again, I'm sure you'd echo the sentiment that you're not just looking for the international conglomerates. The door is open for small to medium-sized businesses here as well.
I don't think there's a better place than you to come to the Philippines as far as a small company goes. I was a small company, 3 people. I pulled my own Ethernet cable. So you'll see that a few unicorns have come up, such as Gcash, which is also backed by the firms that were like Ant that were early in. But the fact that we welcome that, even if you're a small company, it's not all roses, right? It's really frustrating right now for the SEC to try to get your documents. It takes much longer than Singapore, but we have lowered from 5 to 1-man corporations. So those are easier. So my suggestion is, number 1, get a reputable, good lawyer. Spend a little bit more, but you'll be happier in the end. Number 2, look for a reputable Philippine partner that can help guide you through. One thing that I have to say is, don't mistake that we're so Western, we speak English, we're Western. Scratch the surface, we're really Asian. So there are nuances that a Philippine partner can bring to your relationship.
It's incredible, and this is just, it's all grown on me as you've taught. The parallels with what you described there also fits the mold of Singapore. And when people talk about confidence in Singapore, there's not many countries on the face of the earth that inspire more confidence. So that's certainly a move in the right direction. I think it's appropriate to throw it open to the floor in case anyone has any questions for Ramon. Great opportunity here to speak to someone that travels the world with the government attracting investment. Has anyone got any queries or questions relating to investing in the Philippines? I think you've been so comprehensive, Ramon, you might have covered most of the things here. Any hands up, or is everyone happy? I don't think we've got any questions. Well, that does it really. I think I'll draw a line under it there, Ramon, if you're happy with it.
I'm happy, and I'd like to leave you with one thing on investing.
Go on.
We coined this in the Philippines. What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. what happened in Macau never happened. But what happens in the Philippines has to happen again real soon. Welcome to the Philippines. Thank you, everybody.
I love it. Thank you. Ramon Garcia, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks indeed. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, brother.
Good stuff.